Penny.
Hi, Pam.
Oh, welcome to Gigi and the 561. You were actually my first guest on my new podcast. You have been with me through a lot of podcasting and blogging, and you have been featured on our website already. So we so appreciate that and your time today. But welcome and thank you for being my very first guest on my new podcast in this
I
new
am
year.
honored.
Well, no, it's all me. So I have to tell you, it's chilly in the Palm Beaches this morning. How is it in the 305 down in Miami?
It is chilly as well. It's warmed up a bit because it's been reminding me of California lately. You wake up and there's like everything's gray and overcast, and then it burns off by 9:30 or so.
Right.
And now it's warm in the sky, not a cloud in the sky. So
it's you can tell in SoFlo when it's chilly for us. Like this morning when I went out, I wore closed-in shoes.
Me too.
It's chilly today. I've got to put on those stuff. Penny Davis. Oh my! You know what a huge fan I am of yours. I hound you. I actually started our relationship, our friendship, by hounding you, and I want to thank you right off the top for not having me thrown off of the Amtrak train and arrested.
No. It was fun.
Because it could have happened, but I have to tell you, I have so much respect for you, and you just, wow. I mean, you Google Penny Davis, and it's just amazing all the things that you're about, and not even to mention just you're a fascinating person in general. But I do want to start out by asking you about your cats. Do you still have 3?
No, 2. Down to 2.
Oh, okay.
One died earlier this year. I had to have her put to sleep.
She's Penny.
Elderly and ill. Yeah.
Well, they have a good life with you down there in South Florida. You spent decades on Broadway.
Yes, decades.
and I have begged you to, put that all out there and let me write your book and everything, but you do slay me, I have to tell you, and we're going to get into your Broadway career, but here's how it works, listeners, with this incredible woman on this line with us. I respect you so much, Penny, and your opinions on things, especially in entertainment and books and things like that, but here's what happens, people. I'm talking to you, not Penny, at this moment. I said, you and I were chatting, Penny, about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and how they captured me too, and how they captured that time period so well. And we're just chatting on. And correct me if I'm right here, but I believe it was, because I've talked with you about so much. I believe it was La La Land. And while I'm just this big fan, you actually knew someone in that film. Isn't that right?
Knew someone in the film?
Yeah, an actor.
Well, funny you should. Actually, yeah, I mean, not well and in passing, but yeah. Now that you mentioned it, and I was just talking about it the other day. That's funny. Timothy Oliphant is let's see. I tend to babble, as you know.
Please do. That's exactly what a podcast is. Babble on.
Sort of my contact with him actually had nothing to do with Broadway. There is a theater. There's a community, to put it that way, in upstate New York, that my husband and I got involved in, thanks to my friend Kevin O'Brien, and it's called Onteora, and it's up in the Catskills. And it was a community that was sort of founded by writers and artists at the turn of the last century. And there are beautiful homes there, and there's a country club. And the story goes that way back at the turn of the century, I don't know whether he was a producer or a writer, but somebody with books had a girlfriend who wanted to be an actress. And so he built her a theater on the Onteora landscape. It's a beautiful place.
Wow.
And it's a lovely little theater, about a 300-seat theater or so.
Oh, that's perfect.
And every summer, you wouldn't know it to look at at them, but they're really rich people have houses there.
Wow.
And they all do one show a year during the summer. And my friend Evan was directing. He had directed a few things, and I'd get involved. My husband is a sound man, and we would get involved in like getting a hand wherever we could. But when Kevin was directing a production of Bye Bye Birdie, and this was back in 2008, I think it was, and it was. They only do 2 shows or 2 performances in late August, and that's it. And it's the community involved. It's amateur night in Dixie. It's just no professionals. And in this case, it was all the kids of these, and some of the adults, and it's a lot of fun. And anyhow, Chris Cade, who gets involved, but Chris, who is a resident up there, who had gotten Kevin and my friend Kevin involved with it, he used to do he directed, he designed, he did everything, but as we say in the biz, shove a broom up his and sweep the stage. But Chris's dad was very ill and actually dying at the time. And so Kevin called me and said, "Is it possible for you to come up and deal with the costumes on the show?" And I said, "You bet," because I wasn't working at the time. So Mike and I drove up, and we planned, because previously we'd only gone up there for a day or 2, but this meant sort of staying for a week and getting it done. And anyway, so we're doing, it was so much fun because we ended up getting a lot of Kevin's worked with me for 20 years, over 20 years. He was usually my star dresser. And anyhow, we're getting the show together. I had never even seen the show. I'd never even seen the movie. So I'm quickly, playing catch up on YouTube.
Wait a minute. You never saw Bye Bye Birdie.
Never saw Bye Bye Birdie. And so I'd ask Chris, I said, "What do you want me to do? Do you want me to help you? Do you want me to do it? What do you want?" Because I tend to be, sort of bullish and just dive right in. Mm-hmm. And he said, "No, Penny." He said, "Just do it." He's good. And it was great because it freed him to spend his time with his dad. So anyway, I wanted to keep it simple, and I did. But I'm building up to the Tim story. So we're getting it all together. I'm getting the kids together. This is what I mean. These are the people who come in jeans and a denim shirt. And I was musing at one point because I wanted to keep the costume plot simple. And I said, "Boy, I was a kid in the 50s, and I remember the look well. And if I could I want to keep, like in the first act, if I could do the boys in like Izod shirts and khaki pants, and just have them all the same but different colors of Izod, because that's what the good mm-hmm. boys, that was the look then,
right?
And the girls were all like circle skirts and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I said, if only I could get those Izod shirts in it, all the colors. And I said, but I don't really have a budget. And they're not. Well,
that's a problem.
So I was musing with this woman, and I knew her name, but I didn't know her background. She said, how many do you need and what colors? I said, well, I can't really out of him. She said, no, I own a menswear store. What would you like? So she provided me with all the pastels and all that. Anyway, that was great. So we get all the costumes together, and we're having a rehearsal. And the number was what is wrong with Rosie or something. Takes place in the bar, and all of a sudden they realized they didn't have a bartender, and who should come wandering in to watch rehearsal but Timothy Oliphant.
Wow! Don't tell me they drafted him.
Yes.
Oh, whoa! Amazing.
And because it turns out, because he's a lovely man, and his wife. And his children spend the summers up there. We'd never met him before, so because he's been a little busy, in the last several years, and so he hadn't been there. But his wife was the daughter of one of the people who owned a home at Ontheora, and they happened to be there that summer with their 3 gorgeous, beautiful blonde children. And he heard about the show, and he just came over to just hang out and see what was going on. And it was like, hey, you want to be the bartender?
That is really something. I mean, something. Wow.
The non-speaking role of the bartender.
That's
Gigi was played by Timothy Olaf.
Well, I tell you, Penny, you spent your career on Broadway. You as a wardrobe supervisor. When I did my blog post about you, the story about you, I would fall into calling you a designer, and you corrected me on that. It's like I am not a designer. I am a dresser, and I am a wardrobe supervisor. And I recently read a lot of stuff about that career, and you dressed through these years. The talent that you draped clothing in. So people, if you have been to Broadway in the last many, many years, now, Penny, you've been down in Miami for a while now, but you have seen actors on the stage dressed by this woman that I'm speaking to right now, or people working with her on her team. And it's really a very interesting career, Penny. I tell you, one of the things that I read, and it leapt out at me because of knowing you, they said they were talking to some wardrobe supervisors in this story, and they said typically a person that will be dressing these actors, these famous people, know pretty quickly how it will go with that particular person, how you will gel. It happens pretty quickly, and two or three other things that leapt off the page to me, how you see these people at their most vulnerable. You see them without any clothes on sometimes, and you have to be like you're not really seeing them so that they can fully trust you. There's such a trust issue and like we've talked about, you have to keep their confidences because you're in the room with them when they may be talking about personal things and there's such a level of trust with these professionals like you where they know they have that trust. You have earned that trust. And
that's why I can't write that book.
Yeah, I know, and it just upsets me to no end. But
My best stories I cannot tell.
You have told me that before so many times, and I just resent the hell out of it. But I respect it so much. But some of the things that are pretty amazing to me about what your career entailed, the quick changes and the having the clothes so ready to go that there's no room for error when the show is going. There's just not. No. But error does happen, and so you have to be ready for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would always try to troubleshoot a fast change, and I would think, what would I do if such and such happened? And I would try to, I would try to make a plan so that if it did happen, I didn't have to stop and think about what I was going to do. For example, one of the shows was a play called Lost in Yonkers, which was a Simon show. And I took a change. I was the wardrobe supervisor on it, but there was one change with one of the sister character, not one of the major roles, and I took the change. It was a very quick change, and we did it in the dark, right in this sort of doorway of. She came out of the door on the set. She went into what was supposed to be another room, and I was there in the dark, waiting for this quick change. And it was a zipper all the way down the front of the dress that she got into. So I rigged the costume she was getting out of was a button, like a shirtwaist dress that buttoned all the way up the front. And I had that rigged on snaps because they're much more trustworthy. And she had plenty of time to get into that costume. And getting out of it with snaps was a breeze. You just right, yeah. But she had to step into a dress that was a zipper all the way up the front, and then it had a self belt on it. And so I thought, okay, what's going to happen if this zipper breaks or jams on me? I'm in the dark. I really had to do everything by feel. And what am I going to do? So I thought, okay, if I have a hook and eye at the top of the bodice, the top of the zipper, and I have a hook and eye at the waist on the placket of the dress, I can keep the dress together, because she only had to go back on stage for a minute and then she was done. So I thought, all I have to do is keep that dress together, even if the zipper's broken, for a minute, and then that's okay. So I did these hooks at the top and at the waist, and sure enough, one night that zipper jammed on me. And luckily it jammed, it didn't break, and so I got it halfway up. But just getting the top and the waist done kept it together, and I didn't have to think about it. When the zipper jammed, I just went right to the hooks.
You were ready.
So,
Penny, tell everyone some of the it's vast, but maybe some of your favorite Broadway productions that you have been involved in.
Funnily enough, today is the anniversary of the opening, and there are a few on Facebook. There are a few Broadway webpage or Facebook pages that I belong to. Some are of professionals, and and somebody posted that The Real Thing opened today in 1984. 1984? Oh my goodness, 1984. And it was it's the anniversary, and that was probably one of my two favorite productions that I worked on were The Real Thing and Smokey Joe's Cafe. They're dear to my heart.
Why is that, Penny?
Well, The Real Thing was Mike Nichols, whom I adored. I had done a few shows with him. And it was a great cast. It was a great play, a Tom Stoppard play. And it was Jeremy Irons and Glenn Close and Christine Baranski.
I love Christine. I love her. She's so talented.
Yeah, I've done, I think, like 4 or 5 shows with Christine. And I adore her. She's one of the smartest people I've ever met and one of the nicest. And I love her. And Jeremy was great. Everything about that production was perfect.
I think he would scare me. He just seems so smart and so.
Jeremy?
Yeah, he just seems like I would be so intimidated. I think.
He's like Errol Flynn. He's and that's why it was funny because I'm talking about it now because I was writing about it earlier, because one of the people on this Facebook page was a stage manager that I had met in passing, but I'd never worked with. And we had an incident, or not an incident, but Cynthia Nixon was doing the show, and she was a teenager at the time. I think she was 15 when we were doing the play, and she played Jeremy's daughter.
This is Cynthia Nixon of Sex and the City, guys.
Yeah. And they wanted her to do, there was another, Mike Nichols was directing another play soon after we opened called Hurly Burly. And Cynthia in The Real Thing only had one scene, the beautiful, knock 'em dead scene, but only that was it for her in our play. And Hurly Burly, was a 3-act play. She was going to be in Act 1 and Act 3 of Hurly Burly. So we were sitting in my wardrobe area, and she was saying, I don't want to leave. I want to do a new show, but I don't want to leave this one. And I said, why don't you do both? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, Hurly Burly's, Act 1, Act 2. There's no reason why you can't do both. She went, oh. She said, well, I'm going to mention that to someone. So she mentioned it to Mike Nichols, who was directing both, had directed both. And she went, that's a good idea. And so she ended up doing both shows for quite some time. And
wow.
And Tom Kelly, who was he's the person I've been talking with back and forth, was a stage manager, oddly enough, at Death of a Salesman at the time. And he was free, so he would escort her. She would do the first act of Hurly Burly, and then she would come over to me. I had her costume all set up in my wardrobe room, and he would escort her over from the Barrymore. It was 2 blocks away, and she would change, and then she would go upstairs, do her scene in The Real Thing, come back down. I would get her back into her hurly-burly costume again, and then she would go back to Barrymore and do Act 3 of
What a great experience for her as a young actress.
Yeah, and of course, Equity got their knickers in a twist, and that's not allowed anymore.
It's they don't allow people to do that anymore.
No,
really?
It's called the Cynthia Nixon Clause.
Oh, how
because
fascinating!
basically, what nobody thought about was she was putting somebody out of a job.
Okay, got it.
And with unions, you just don't do that.
Yeah,
so they do. Apparently, it has on rare occasions. It has been done before. Actually, you know what? Now that I think of it, it came up while she was still doing it, because eventually what Equity did was they demanded, I hate to that sounds so harsh, but they demanded that if you were going to do that, then you had to hire a person just to get paid, like, you know.
Okay.
So
yeah.
we ended up with 2 understudies her character name was Debbie. Debbie had 2 understudies. So even though Cynthia was running back and forth doing the show, there were 2 people sitting down in the basement playing Trivial Pursuit with me.
See, you started all that trouble. You're just a troublemaker. You're just a rebel.
Yeah.
Before we get to some other things that I know you have been very interested in for a while, I have to ask you about one thing that doesn't have anything to do with Broadway. When I do a lot of research, you know that, but one thing that popped up, and I couldn't drill down into it, and it stuck. I made a notation of it because I wanted to ask you about it. Were you a dresser on As the World Turns?
As a matter of fact, well, they would call them dressers there, but yeah, I worked on that. Yeah, I worked on it in 1990 for about, let's see, because it was between my show had closed, because mostly I did Broadway, but I did some soap opera. I did The Guiding Light for a while. I did Another World for a while out in Brooklyn, and As the World Turns, I worked on from about 6 or 7 months, I think, until Lost in Yonkers. In fact, I left As the World Turns to start Lost in Yonkers.
I have to tell you, As the World Turns, it's why it caught my eye. It was the very first soap opera I ever saw because my grandmother was this huge fan, and there was no talking. The world came, but she didn't call it soap opera. She called it her story. I had to sit down and watch my story, and so everything ended while As the World Turns was on with Bob and Lisa and you know, the whole bit. But well, you cleared that up for me because I really
I can tell you some funny stories about them too.
If you can talk about it, we'll do another podcast just about soap operas. Can you?
Yeah. That's fine.
Oh, do you promise to do another podcast about it?
And I'll talk about soap opera because soap operas are ripe material for funny stories.
We're doing that. You are on. I'm going to hold you to that. But I do want to talk about Broadway in general just a little bit. The history of Broadway, and then I want to talk about where we are now, or where we are not. But one thing, when you do research on Broadway, the things that come up are incredible. And one thing that I loved, a Ghost of Broadway, where you have these stories and these theaters that are, you know, they have these little hidden doors and all of these great stories. But there's a lot of talk about Ghost of Broadway. And one of them, to me, the main thing that came up was the Belasco. And it had been another, on 44th, it had been another. What was the theater that it was before it was the Belasco?
It was always the Belasco.
Oh, okay.
Because it was built, I never did a show in there, but went from, again, here with The Real Thing. When we were in Boston with The Real Thing, there was an actor that got fired. His name, he was so many nameless because I can't remember his name, but he was fired and replaced, and he, as is typical in the theater, is they don't give you notice the way a normal job would say you have.
Oh, that's hard.
Whatever.
You're there and then you're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoa.
And so there were a few of us who knew this was going to happen and because they were going to fire him at the end of Boston, and then we were coming into Broadway from there. And so they were secretly rehearsing with another actor in New York. And they were rehearsing with him at the Belasco. And so when I came back in to deal with his costumes and for the new actor, and the Belasco was it's fascinating because David Belasco, who was an impresario, again at the turn of the last century, he was a playwright, and he built this theater for him, basically for his productions as well as for other people's. And he was he dressed very dramatically in a slouch hat and a cape and all that. And he had an apartment at the top of the Belasco that, he could look out onto the stage and watch what was going on stage. And rumor has it that his ghost haunts the Belasco. But I got to see, when I was there fitting the costumes for the new actor, I guess it was maybe it was the stage doorman or whoever I was dealing with at the theater itself, said, "Hey, do you want to see the apartment?" And I went, "You bet." So yeah, because at the time the Schubert archives were kept at the Belasco because it was rarely used for shows. It was kind of a dead house back then at the time. And so we went up to the apartment, the Belasco apartment, and it was used basically for storage. It was, I think now it's out of reach, but it had this huge fireplace and hearth, and it was lots of stonework and wood, and a very dramatic apartment that if somebody had just thought to fix it up, they could have charged a fortune for it. Wow. But that theater has always been the Belasco because that was him. And it's supposed to be, I guess the most, if you're going to talk about the most haunted, it's the most haunted of the Broadway theaters that I've ever heard of.
That's kind of what I read too.
Ghosts and, I don't know.
Well, he also, correct me if I'm wrong here, was the very first one to do, I want to say it was in 1900, to do the Madame Butterfly, production of Madame Butterfly. I think David Belasco was the first one to do that. But I think one of the reasons, too, it's so notorious, I guess, is because of the showgirl that fell down the elevator shaft. And they call her the Blue Lady, and people claim that they see the Blue Lady. I could keep you here talking about this stuff forever. But before we get to kind of where Broadway is now, I want to talk just a little bit about the Coconut Grove, because I know you are a big supporter. You also worked there.
Where it started. I wouldn't have had a career without the Coconut Grove Playhouse.
Well, I know now it's not good, but are they? Is everything going to be okay? Or because what I have read is that the many people fear it is protected, but they fear that there still will be demolition that shouldn't happen to that great theater.
Absolutely, and it keeps going. It's gone back and forth, and it just went back again. We thought we were in the clear because our dear Mayor Suarez had actually come through and vetoed it. It's got historical status, but from the Florida, and we worked very hard, those of us who want to save the Playhouse and restore it. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's got national historic status too, but it doesn't seem to cut any ice with the Miami-Dade County. It's where you get into, I don't understand all the politics of Miami, but in the different jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. But at one point last year, the historical, I forget the acronym for it, but I've been to several meetings, but I haven't been to some of the recent meetings. Or the somewhat, because we haven't had any recent meetings since COVID. Right. But anyway, Mayor Suarez, it was voted down, and so it looked like the county was going to get its way and just save the facade. And then Mayor Suarez vetoed it, and it was like, yay, Mayor Suarez. Well, and that's how it's remained for, over a year now. And then last week, I'll send it to you. Some judge, it went to some district court, and the judge has basically ruled Suarez's veto invalid.
Oh, no.
And chucked it back to Michael Spring, the evil cultural affairs, person in charge, and he wants to destroy it.
Oh my gosh! Oh no!
Well, they want to do. There's this huge parking lot, and they want to develop. They want the land. They don't give a damn about the Playhouse. And so, and they're saying that was the joke. It was a bad joke to say there is no history in the auditorium.
Oh, unreal.
Because there have been so many alterations to the auditorium that there's no history there. By alterations, there's this one architectural historian here named George Hernandez, who, if I said, let's start a drinking game, if every time you hear the term Solomonic columns, spell back, a shot of your favorite. And those are, there's some that are left, but not enough to make it all worthwhile. And there was an addition done, and I was there when the Alfred Brown and Parker did the mezzanine, and then there were dressing rooms added backstage. And I was working there at that time. I remember it. And I spoke to George Hernandez about it because he got some of his stuff was just wrong. And anyhow, they want to destroy the auditorium and just save the facade. And they want to build a 300-seat theater, which is ridiculous because we already have over 10 theaters in Miami that are approximately one side or the other of 300 seats. We don't need another 300-seat black box theater.
Yeah.
And that's what really galls me. And the history that's in the auditorium of that theater is remarkable. I mean, just my memories alone, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
And there's an architect. Don't ask me his name. Hisselbottom. This is so embarrassing. Hisselbottom. He's an architect, a very renowned architect in the state of Florida, and he is on our side. And he has studied that theater and the auditorium, and he is convinced it can be restored effectively and economically, and so he is on our side for restoration. But Michael Spring wants to tear it all down, save the facade, put up a bunch of stores and a 300-seat stupid theater, and then build condos in the parking lot and have turn it into a garage with condos. Don't you want to spend a lot of money to live in a garage? I do.
Well, that part of Miami, if you're not familiar with Miami, that's a great part of Miami. So
they've wrecked the Grove already. In some ways, part of me just wants to shrug and go ahead, tear it down.
Don't give up, Penny.
No.
Don't do it. Don't give up. Keep the good fight, because it matters. Because Florida doesn't have, it's not like things haven't already just been torn down right and left everywhere in Florida. Yeah. It's really true. Oh, okay, let's talk just briefly about where you think Broadway, what's going to happen after COVID.
Oh boy, I don't know. It's going to take a while, I would think. They've already, they're postponing it. I think if they get reopened by next fall, that'll be lucky. Some shows have already talked about opening in the late spring, early summer. Like Hamilton
they have. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Gary and I were talking about it. It's like those seats, those theaters, you're together. You have no leg room. You are together. So as the audience. So I don't know. It's all horrible, and I don't want to go.
Just the rules. No, just the way they're doing. Like right now, just what's happening with them starting up with some television production. Because I'm, with my union, because we work more closely with the actors than anybody, and so what we're trying to establish work rules and safety procedures for. How can you can't wear full body armor and do quick changes.
Right.
There's not a whole lot of point. Maybe I'm being Debbie Downer, but to me, there's not a whole lot of point on trying to reopen the shows until you can really do them.
I agree.
Even if you do them, with some spacing in the audience, I don't know. I worry because it's the theater live events are one of the most heavily unionized industries in this country. And one of the things I said to my husband, who is an old union man, as was I, what's going to happen? They're laying out all the unions, Equity, IATSE, they're all laying out money to retirees like me. I get a pension. And my husband, we get health benefits as retirees and all this. How are they going to keep laying out all this money and with very little coming in?
Yeah.
What's going to happen? It's not just theater. It's live events all over the country. It's concerts. It's theater. It's touring. It's everything. And it's mind-boggling when you stop and really, it's easy to be glib and say, oh, well, the theaters are closed. Oh, Broadway this, but when I stop and really think about it, literally my jaw drops because it's so overwhelming to think about what is going to happen between now and when they can reopen. Already, our health, my husband, I'm on my husband's health care plan. That has been altered.
Oh, really?
And has been dropped. Yeah, it has not been dropped. It's been lessened because of all this. Because you can't afford to keep things up, and that's become in healthcare. I mean, I remember, a funny, my wardroom was always a place where the actors would hang out, and we would all, shoot the breeze before the show and during the show and all that. And at one point, I'd say about 12 or 13 years ago, I began to notice a change in the conversations backstage. And instead of it being, oh, I had a great audition today, or, oh, I saw this wonderful movie and I would much better in the role, all that sort of actor talk, the actor talk more often than not would turn to working long enough in the year to have health insurance. And so far be it for me to get political, but I mean, that's become, if we have learned nothing else in the past year, we have learned that we've really got to do something about that. But that's that's not what you're here, what you want me to talk about.
No, I want you to talk about what you want to talk about, and it is important. It's incredibly important.
Live events are it's staggering. I don't know when it's going to be safe, because look at what Tom Cruise, that got so much publicity.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And number one, he's absolutely right. And sometimes you got to scream and swear to get somebody's attention.
Yeah, you do.
That set, from what I heard and read, that set had already been shut down 3 times with down with COVID.
You know what? I didn't know that. Wow.
So no wonder he was pissed off.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And now they've been trying to, I know Mrs. Maisel, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, has been trying to start up in New York, and there have been some other, startups, but now Holly, I think, is giving up now because LA is in such bad shape.
It's terrible, and it's California. It's absolutely terrible out there. It really is. Well, and the thing is, it's like one thing that you told me, as you know, I'm a huge fan. I was a huge fan, still am a huge fan of Jack Lemmon. This woman, Penny Davis, actually hung out with Jack Lemmon, people. She would go to lunch with him at a little restaurant by the theater that is now closed. Was closed even before. and I have a photo of her holding an Oscar at the home of Jack Lemmon, and it was his Oscar. So I'm so jealous of half the people I know. My envy level is like really high. But my point is, it just has so many tentacles. Not just Broadway, everywhere in this country, but all these things that go on in a very small radius there in New York City, in a theater district. are so impacted by the shows. It's like you go to dinner, you go to Joe Allen's, which was you said got to go to Joe Allen's
favorite,
back then. Yeah, and we actually they let us in, and we were shocked. But it's just the tentacles. We could spend another hour talking about that, but I do want to.
I asked about this. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a retired prop man. This is my attempt at being funny about it. But one of my first thoughts before I started thinking of the enormity of the seriousness of the problem was back in March, the theaters, Broadway shut down very quickly. It was like somebody got sick. Moulin Rouge had a number of people getting sick. They took the brunt of it. But at one point, a friend of mine was working on, they were doing a production of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and it had just started previews. And an usher on matinee, a Wednesday matinee, they discovered that one of the ushers had COVID. And that night, they shut that show down.
Wow.
And the next day, Broadway shut down on basically like 6 hours notice. And so now this is the part that my screwy brain, after a bit, all I could think of was, and everybody thought, the shows will be shut down for a couple of weeks, and then we'll all go back to work. And of course, that has not happened. And meanwhile, almost everybody in their dressing rooms, in the wardrobe rooms, the prop rooms, the stage manager offices, all the areas backstage, everybody's got a refrigerator of one type or another. All I think of, I said to my friend Jimmy, we were on the phone one day, I said, if the shows reopen, whenever they reopen, all I can picture is all through the theater district, green empty dumpsters lined up.
Oh, you're so right, Penny.
You're so street. And the theater. Do you remember the show SCTV that used to be on?
Of course.
And how the opening of that was always people throwing their televisions out the window. All I can imagine are all these refrigerators just thrown out.
Hey, that takes dumpster diving to a whole new level.
All these refrigerators that people that have old yogurt.
Oh God! Okay, I don't even want to think about that. I don't want to think about it. Okay,
anyway,
we're going to wrap up here very shortly, but I do want to ask you, what do you consider? I have a couple of questions here. One, you're shining, you're glowing. The thing you look to. I think we all do at various points in our career. That was it right there. That either changed my career or it was just the pinnacle. What is that for you?
Wow. Well, to me, the pinnacle was the show I loved the most and was proudest of was The Real Thing, because it was a very difficult set to work on and a dangerous set, and it had very, very fast changes. And Mike Nichols liked shows that looked like they were movies, so that there was no time in between scene changes. And that Tony Walton designed the set. It was brilliant. It was actually written up in a theater magazine. It was just a brilliant set. But it was a turntable with 3 pies, basically divided into 3, the big turntable, and each of the slices had a set on it, and then there were 2 smaller turntables divided into 3, and each one of those basically had doors or another part of another set. And between each scene change, these turntables would move, and we would be and we couldn't have any bite lights or any form. The only light we could have was they put a UV light way up in the fly floor. And so anything we really needed to see, we had to put glow tape on it.
Oh, gosh.
We'd have like glow tape, a piece of glow tape in a pair of shoes. If you had to step into a pair of shoes, we would have to see those shoes with a little glow tape. I had to have black drop cloths, and I did I called it Jeremy's landing strip. I had like an X in the center because Jeremy at one point would have to come out of the set, off the turntable, and then jump back onto the turntable, onto one of the other pie. So I know I'm describing this poorly.
No,
and
you're not.
I had this black drop cloth with an X, so that all I had to do was look for the X and jump there. And because the turntable, the sets were always moving, so working on the sets could be tricky because they would go at different speeds.
Yeah.
And if you were lucky, the speed would be slow. But a lot of times the set would then sort of whip around, and you had to do your thing and then get the hell off the turntable. And so that was probably, it was a hard show to lay out and a hard show to work, but a very satisfying one and fun because it was a great cast, and we just had a lot of fun. It was great. I started to babble. I distracted myself as usual with Cynthia, but working with Jeremy was like what I would imagine with Errol Flynn was, only maybe without the difficulty. Yeah. Jeremy was a star of the old school. For a young man at that time, he knew the responsibilities of being a star, and he was willing to fulfill them. He wasn't one of these, torn T-shirts, scratching stomach school of. He knew he had a responsibility to the audience and to backstage. And I just adored him, and he was fun and very respectful of what he did, and I loved him for that because a lot of actors don't. They're in it. They do the. I don't know. I'm not.
I know. I hear you. I mean, there are egos to be that come into play. But I know
he had an ego. I said he was like Errol. He was very flamboyant, and I used to tease him. I said, I don't care what they say about you, Jeremy. I love you.
Well, I know this. It is every single thing that I've read about wardrobe staff supervisors, the great team of people behind those curtains. Every single person that I read about. I mean, while the audience is looking at and admiring the people on the stage, from what I read, the people on the stage, as a rule, a majority of the things that I read, 100% really of what I read, they have so much respect for the people behind the curtain, the people that do those fast changes, that keep everything, that have the hooks instead of the zipper in case there's a problem. I mean, it's incredible how much information is out there about your craft and what you have spent your career doing. Yeah. But I want to ask you what advice, if any, you have for up-and-comers, people that want to do what you did. Any advice?
Do it whenever you can. I've been working since I moved back down to Miami. I got involved with my old high school. I was a thespian, and Palmetto High School was. I graduated from Coral Gables High School, which I hated, but most of
Coral Gables is so she.
Oh, please. And but from the time I was in elementary school, I went to school. I lived in Pinecrest, and I went to school all through elementary and then junior and senior high school. And then we had to move, and we moved to Gables. So I left Palmetto when I was at the end of the 10th grade, but I loved it. That's where all my friends were. That's where my heart was. So when I came back down here, I had reconnected with my old drama teacher from Palmetto, because she was a very young woman when she was teaching there, and it turns out there's only like 10 years of difference in our ages. And she introduced me to the current drama teacher at Palmetto High School. And at one point, when I was getting rid of a bunch of my wardrobe supplies that I had dragged down here from New York, once I admitted that it was over, I wasn't going to be working again. So I thought, well, who can I get this stuff to? Because it's good. Right. And so Marty, my friend Marty, my old drama teacher, said, well, why not Robin? Why not call Robin? So she introduced us, and so Robin took all this stuff. And so sometimes I go over to, when they're doing a show there, I'll go over and give advice. And I was talking to a lot about high school kids right now are so much more sophisticated than we were. Mm-hmm. And the teaching in school they have an actual, backstage classes and stage management in high school.
Oh, I didn't know that.
take step classes. I'm shocked by that.
Yeah.
One kid there at Palmetto, whose name is Logan, and he loves to do the hair and the makeup on their productions. And I was helping out on a production a couple of years ago on Drowsy Chaperone, which is a great show. Anybody get a chance to see any production of Drowsy Chaperone, do. It's actor proof. You can't go wrong. He said, this is what I want to do. I want to be a Broadway, hairdresser, wig stylist, blah, blah, blah. So I called a couple of my friends, wig people on Broadway, and I asked if it was okay if I gave Logan their numbers so he could get in touch with them and ask them for their advice, blah, blah. And so they've been helpful to him. And I like to think that he'll say, he stayed in touch with them, and that if he ever goes to New York, he may have a leg up.
And that's so important, to give back and to give a hand out to others like that. I mean, I'm so happy to hear that. I think that's because it's tough. It's a tough world. And as I said to someone recently, we all stand on other people's shoulders at one time or another. And then it becomes our responsibility to be the one where someone's standing on our shoulders.
If you go down here, I'm surprised that there's so much. There's a lot of theater, there will be when it starts again, a whole lot of theater here in Miami. And one of the wonderful company called the Miami Lyric Opera. My husband worked with the sound man for the Metropolitan Opera for many, many years. And he loves it even more than I do, but we both very much enjoy opera. And this is a small company. And at one point, and we would go see their productions, because you can go see a really beautifully sung opera for like $40. The tickets are relatively inexpensive. And the productions, they don't have a lot of money for big, glamorous, the Florida Grand Opera does big, wonderful, fancy schmancy productions. But this company does wonderful productions with great voices and at a reasonable price.
That's great.
At one point, we were seeing one of the productions, and I could see this, like, one hem was hanging. Do they have anybody to help them out? Oh God, please let me I want to just run up on stage and fix that hem.
I was going to just Penny in the wings going, come here, just 1 second. I just need to see you 1 second.
And so they have one of the things with Facebook is almost every organization has a Facebook page. So anyway, I messaged them and I said, where do you get your clothes, your stuff? And do you have anybody to deal with it? And so the person wrote me back and said, mostly we rent things. And they said, if you'd like to volunteer. And so I actually thought about it, and I thought, no, I'm really kind of too lazy to do that. But that's just it. If you're interested in it, and you've got a local theater company, or even a local high school production, whatever, there's one at Palmetto High School. There's a woman there who's the mother of one of the students, and she's a she's a surgeon. So I found out, and because she was around for Drowsy Chaperone, and then last year they did Merrily We Roll Along, and I was helping out for it, less on Drowsy, but helping out on that. And she was whipping up these clothes. I'm going like, lady, you're incredible, beautiful work. And I thought, she's somebody's mother. and Robin, the teacher there, she said, oh yeah, I so love that because she's such a busy woman. I said, what does she do? And she said, she's a surgeon.
Well, she's really good with scissors.
Exactly. And needles and thread.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, wow. Penny, thank you so much. And I am going to hold you to that soap opera podcast.
I'm a lot less protective of people.
We have to do that. We really do. I'm going to definitely book that with you. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I really appreciate it. You know how I continue to hound you. I will never stop hounding you. So thank you for. And
now that the holidays are over, let me have your address and I'll send you that costume of Sandy Dennis's.
Oh, that would be so great. I will definitely do that. That would just be thrilling beyond words.
Okay.
So, everyone, that was Penny Davis, Wardrobe Supervisor on Broadway for many years, and just all-around interesting person. Thank you so much for being here for this podcast, and look for her podcast. It will be on iTunes and many other platforms, but also on northpalmbeachlife.com. We will have an entire page for her and her podcast on northpalmbeachlife.com. But if you can't go there, please visit us at iTunes or Gigi in the 561. We appreciate you for listening and for being here, and be sure to stay tuned.